Okay, so it's changing a little bit. It's kind of bouncing, and the focus for you. It might have changed your screen as well. It says Irina is recording the call. So hello, how are you over there?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Your hair still seems like there's gravity affecting it, even though you're in outer space right now.
Yeah, I can handle gravity here, don't worry.
Good. I wanted to thank you for trying again because the first time we tried to do this, well, you were having some, but most of the computer and internet issues were on my side. And again, I'm telling you, it's possible that my camera might appear. I'll notice it too, but you will see, and it'll be part of the recording. Maybe lines will show up at some point. But it's nice that you schedule an appointment, Irina, again with me fairly quickly because I'm late. This is part of a homework for my course for the Master of Science in Ecocentric Sustainability type of worldview, ecocentric humanism, where we would be a secondary priority in this kind of systems thinking programming. And worldviews are at the core of what guides our values and behaviors and ethics and goals and things like that. So I would have liked to post it on November 1st. Are you okay with me posting it right after we are finished on my YouTube channel?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so are you okay with an hour to an hour and a half?
Yep.
Okay, and are you okay with me being the moderator where I will introduce the subject and then kind of guide us back on course?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so here's a new question that I have to introduce the subject, and you might find it interesting that I said, how much religious faith should we put into relocating to other Earth-like planets? Because I think for me, I wanted to say it like that to maybe define a little bit, that it's kind of nice to see astronomy stuff on the news and the geeky, popular scientists that are kind of science explainers talk about something, but I don't get anybody talk to me about it after it appeared in the news. Nobody tells me, hey, did you see this or hear this? Nothing about science from anybody I know is kind of brought back to my attention from the news. But the subject here is, I think it's risky doing this. I think it's risky, especially with the worldviews we have now, where we are not yet admitting that we are breaking our perfect planet, which means we are counter-terraforming it. We have no actual terraforming experience. So it's kind of weird that nobody's talking about this, and it's at a stage again in our history where people alive today remember the first atomic bombs going off, which kind of in our minds, although we don't discuss it, it affected our worldviews because now our planet became disposable. And maybe, the possibility of escape is always there, although the science that we're going to discuss about the likelihood or possibility of going to other planets is kind of ridiculous during our lifetime, or even, I would say, in the next even 800 years of scientific advance. And even if we focused on that, I think it's not very likely. So what do you think about this new way to introduce this subject?
So, but you can say that it's risky. That's from your perspective, the perspective of perpetuating this system of believing in endless technological progress and endless growth, economic growth. From this perspective, it's very beneficial for the system to put the news about that and get people focusing on on the possibilities of discovering an Earth-like planet, and believing this myth that we can easily just mess up with our planet and move to another planet because of their great belief in technological progress. And I think that's what where the religious, how you describe the religious belief comes from, is believing in technological progress and that technology can solve all the problems that we are facing. So I think that's where, that's why even the scientists and of course the mass media of the scientific community, they put the news like this. They make it popular because it's good for the economy. Having people believe in that we can just easily go to another planet, and we don't have to take care of our planet, the only home that we have ever known, as Carl Sagan said. So it's very good for the system. It brings money, because it brings technology, and it brings economic growth. Why not to go ahead and talk about that in mass media to attract more, even intelligence, what's called intelligent minds, like scientific minds.
So are you saying this, Irina, because you believe it's a positive thing to mention it, or you just say people that support the business status quo are doing it just to kind
Oh
of
yeah, the second one.
provide false hope and keep the people in the system that is, an evolutionary dead end, this monetary system?
Yeah, the second one, of course, the second one. I don't believe that it's a positive thing. But again, it's from my perspective, right? Because my value system comes from the foundation of the basis for life is and taking care of the only home that we ever know again. So, but it's not the value system of everyone. But I'm not saying that it's positive or negative. It's just what your value system tells you. For them, it's positive because it brings growth, it brings money, it brings more technology on the table, and brings more development, what's called development, exploration of other resources. So that's why what I meant is, of course, not from my perspective of positive thing, but it's from the perspective of the system, perpetuating the system, continuing the system of the myth, because it is a myth, it's not scientifically founded, that we can have an infinite growth on the finite planet.
You know what I predict using my theory of HSD is that as things continue to decline in our biosphere, in our living system, is that both religious and magical, and that's the monetary paradigm believers in their worldviews, at the basis, either supernatural or magical, but even the scientists who know the science, that, this is not something in their lifetime, if ever, would be possible. And of course, I think if we ever managed to collaborate enough, and there needed to be a lot of collaboration to reach the moon, for example, and in the magical monetary paradigm, it's not about collaborations, it's about competition. So even if we become so desperate to leave here because we continue to break our own planet, our own heaven, whether you want to define it in a religious way or in we evolved here, we're perfectly suited for here. I still believe that if we ever leave out of desperation, that the generations and generations and hundreds of years and even thousands of years of competitive cultures and tribe versus tribe mentality would even screw up this supposed, and I think possibly I've seen a few episodes of the space traveling show with the actress, I can't remember her name right now, and you could see that there's a small group, but there's still a lot of deceit and espionage going on Earth, and I think that's kind of who we are right now. And I can tell that the scientific paradigms aren't growing among majorities, and it needs to be, because, for example, as things are getting worse, I think I'm seeing more master MBAs, Master of Business Administration or things like that. And even the most reputable universities that had great science programs are now going more towards that because that's where the money is. And also they're doing it more online, so it's even less quality. I did a search before you logged on because my course is called capital S, capital M, capital S, and then small c dash capital ECO. So Master of Ecocentric, that's the first priority in the worldview. Now, when I did that search to see if my things would pop up, I had Master of Science in Economics. So that's pretty sad that it's not a Master of Arts or a Master of Mental Illness. It was actually a Master of Science. So again, those are very scary science. And if I ask most people I know, do you know what astrology is? Okay, do you know what astronomy is? 9 people out of 10 that I know, and maybe you can say the same, or what's cosmetology, or what's cosmology? And again, you can tell the scientific ignorance. So even if they put the best people, they might not even find enough for this, mission of this ship that would be built out of collaborations, and it wouldn't be built because of discovery like Star Trek, like the search or the adventure or the quest for the unknown. It would be out of desperation because we broke things here. And we'd be so paranoid and insecure and fearful at that point that it would be doomed to fail, even when we would leave for the wrong reasons. And then, of course, I keep thinking in science fiction terms that if there was a galactic empire of smarter species out there, and they're kind of observing us, whether they're doing it directly or through probes that have been there for hundreds of years, they might say, hey, these guys are starting to come close to leaving their solar system and they're poison. And I think we should kind of shut them down, because look what they did to their planet. And we can tell they're not feeling guilty at all about it. That's pretty nasty, because whether they claim to believe in evolution or creationism, then they still aren't repenting about what they did. They just think, oh, we're great. And again, you're talking about technology, Irene. I'll just finish up about this, is that as the more technology advances, the more modernity accelerates, the more it gets away from long-term thinking types of wisdom. And the more our technology backfires or is going to be used against us, either directly or indirectly, because like we're speeding up vaccines for COVID. We're not thinking long-term yet. I think we're doing more harm than good with technology right now, instead of focusing on collaborative human thinking tools as social creatures, and also on resiliency and adaptation. What do you think about many of those things?
There is a lot of them. Yeah, I would agree that we do much more harm with technology than than we get benefits from. First of all, it's in terms of energy, right? We just produce a lot of garbage, like gadgets that really, you could say, oh, it's the gadget to monitor a health, or it's a gadget, but in the end, like statistically speaking, people buy them and they just play a little bit with them for a couple of months and then they throw them away. There is so much garbage just because the system is based on obsolescence, right? So if you buy stuff, you have to throw it away, so you will buy a new stuff. So it's not based on designing the best of best health monitoring gadget, so you will not throw it away, because it will be like better than your giving you better information about your health status than your doctor or than a doctor who you visit. So I would say there is a lot of garbage. It's just a result and consequence of the system that they built on the profits, profit-oriented system. The only goal of every single country or nation, the only goal of every single even person is to become wealthy, and wealthy in monetary terms, right? To grow. How do you grow? Oh, your salary goes up, or your nation's GDP goes up, blah, blah, blah. All these concepts is just all these consequences of overuse of technology, or a bad use of the technology, as I mentioned, that you buy one and you throw it away. It's just a consequence of the system that we are living. And I think it needs to be mentioned in that term. It's like, it's not just saying, oh, like, oh, today teenagers use too much or way more technology, and they are like living in their little worlds of whatever they, device or computers, and they lack of human interactions. But what is the cause of all of that? Like, is it education? Is it the system itself? Is it the variety of things to purchase? Like, you need to look at those kind of like what is the root? And I don't think there is one root. There is a combination of the roots of the problem.
Well,
And therefore, statistically, right? So I mentioned about teenagers, and not only teenagers, even like adults, right? Statistically speaking, like people, also have a lot of depression of the social, because of the social media, attachment to the social media. People unlearned how to communicate, how to have human to human interactions, and they'd rather to sit at home and play games, or like use their computer instead of hanging out with friends. So if you say, okay, this is the standard to define that we are overusing the technology, right, with those statistical numbers, how it affects the health, mental health of people. If you take it as a standard, then yes, we have bad technology, too much technology, and it's doing more harm than better.
yeah, and for me, there's examples every day, including some I had today, and you probably will see that too. I've seen so many ways that technology has devolved the human brain. One thing I wanted to disagree with you on that you said, and I could provide some examples just of today, because as soon as I leave the inside of a dwelling, I can pretty much have interactions with the people primates, the Homo communia, that will confirm this. And I've had so much confirmation, and every time I come back to this part of Canada or the world, the National Capital Region, I see it get worse, and still nobody's talking about this. And they're not talking about it because it's a flaw in our mind. That's why we kind of can't even see it, or we think that's just the way the system is. So I have to kind of say I disagree when you say the system or explain various. I might be a socio-cyberneticist, which is related to systems thinking, but I'm also the doctor of humanics, and I can tell you the common denominator is something wrong up here. And the only way we can fix this is not somebody like me, working really hard for the rest of my life to prepare a program and put it for free on videos. Really, that's not going to succeed because I'm just one person. Nobody's going to do this program. So it's all us. It's all us saying, um, I'm going to fix my things. I hope you fix your things up here. And there's no resources. There's no place you make an appointment to say, can I fix this? And again, we can't rely on the mental health system, which doesn't talk about mental illnesses that affect majorities. So, for example, if there's this spaceship and there's an issue, and there's like the manager of this department, and then suddenly there's a fire, and it's not a big issue, and there are fire hydrants on this spaceship, and fires in space are pretty serious, and somebody says, that's not my specialty, I don't do this. I do this. Oh my God, the person is like on the other side of the ship, or he's like frozen right now, he's taking a nap, or whatever it is. It's ridiculous that somebody's not going to use a user-friendly device to put out a fire where the entire system of that ship, because there's nothing outside, it's finished. You got to maintain safety in there. And it's today in Ottawa, I criticized an Ottawa police officer near the end of the conversation, and and I'm saying, hey, is something wrong with the parking meters? And so I get that question a lot. And really, I tried 3 different parking meters that are supposedly designed to be user-friendly, and there's so many flaws just in their design, even if they're not broken. But there's many things going wrong, even if, like raining, you can maybe not see inside the screen, or from humidity. There's a lot of things wrong. So this is an example of technology. And him, as a public servant, he said, well, that's not my department, that's bylaw. And then I kind of forced him to picture my card, and I said, I'm memorizing your name. I'm not going to say what it is. And I said, I want to hear from your department sending a message to the bylaw and say, I want to know why I've wasted so much time. And other people from this area or from outside visiting are going to waste time, and we're not solving this. So he, a very friendly guy, but it starts with him. Does he agree to continue to disconnect from what's happening in his surroundings and be, in essence, if not a culture repairer, a culture breaker? And parents will say, oh, I got to get my daughter a phone because, she might need to call 911. Do you know how many times her daughter might be observed walking into traffic because she's looking down? And people say, oh, this phone can do so many things. If you observe them in a month, how they use their phone, it's mostly as a mirror. It's getting carpal tunnel syndrome on video games or typing what is not really human communication compared to monkeys. And it's really, again, lowering our brain function. So, Irina, I mentioned a lot collective learning. Let me just read this definition I like of collective learning. And collective learning is a complex concept that is variously defined. It is generally conceptualized as a dynamic and cumulative process that results in the production of knowledge. Such knowledge is institutionalized in the form of structures, rules, routines, norms, discourse, and strategies that guide future action. Now, in this definition from Springer Link, it doesn't kind of say that what happened with this, because of the monetary paradigm, is that it became specialized in ways that is disconnecting from other forms of knowledge. So somebody might, and this is how we haven't evolved collective learning, which is found to be defined in other ways in other places, which is like, for example, a village of our ancestors thousands of years ago that could coexist in this village for a very long time with experts of building fires, of fishing, of weaving baskets. And, they'd be over time experts that would teach others, but some would be a little bit better. And their goal would be to create students that are even better than them. But everybody would be able to do most tasks, And so specialized doesn't mean limiting it to that particular skill. So what has caused us to devolve our abilities to learn when our brains are kind of designed for that? Well, I mean, domestication is involved, so the roots of that could be agriculture. So this is, for example, some ideological conversations we need to have if we believe we're ever going to succeed at something like a big goal of reaching another planet, which is with the laws of science related to our physiology, what it's capable of, the ship we would need, the time it would take, the distance, and then, of course, the reality of it is that it wouldn't even be more Earth-like than probably Mars or Venus, very likely, which are not places that we would be able to terraform within even hundreds of years. So it's kind of crazy that we're not having these conversations so much. What do you think?
So what's your question exactly?
What do you think?
Okay, I just reflect on what you said because there is no specific question. So, if you take a look at the history of humankind, you could say that there are like stages of development of what you say, what we see today, the results of what we see today, the behavior patterns that we observe. And it has a lot to do with the agricultural revolution, of course, because if you compare, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, if you compare a life of a gatherer, a hunter, and the life of the person who was born and lived after during the agricultural revolution, you could see a vast difference between the types in physical terms and in mental terms between these types of humans, Homo sapiens. And so, perhaps everyone who is now listening to this video knows that the great difference is way of living, the lifestyle. So if you look at the lifestyle of a gatherer or a hunter, right, in order to survive, they have to explore, they have to learn, they have to learn about the environment, what to eat, what not to eat, how to cook that, how to eat that. Like seasonability of plants, the seasonability of animals. All this stuff needs to be explored in order to have them and their families survive. So if you look at the lifestyle of a person, of a farmer, right? So like they were called farmers after the agricultural revolution, is that physically they were much weaker. Their diet was much poorer, and their lifestyle basically was just, yeah, they learned about how to grow plants, but as a specific place because they were settling in a specific place. So basically, they started to do their routine jobs, what also very similar to what our modern human sapiens do, Homo sapiens do. The routine jobs of getting up in the morning, going check. Yes, I know the seasonability because I have to grow lots of plants. So I need to know the seasonability. But what happened is they stopped exploring. They settled down. And I think the settling down of a human sapiens, that's where, people started also. But they grew families, the population grew because they settled down. So it was easy for them to have families, to settle down one place, to have generations of farmers and so on. So, but they were weaker. They were physically weaker. They were less mentally curious because they didn't have to be. The only thing that they had to do is to grow the stuff, eat it, and sell it. That's it. And at one place, work, work, work. So also there was some, physical changes happened to their backbones. So it's been all the time, all evident, right, through the archaeological findings. So, I don't know. I think it's from that time that people stopped, exploration further, and they just settled down. And settling down means that you're just so surrounded by your close friends or close relatives and close family, and you live in this kind of mental circle of not looking further or not taking care of anyone who is further, or just simply exploring further.
So they were stagnating a little bit by staying in the same place and having their life be a little bit easier. But I'm not sure they were actually working harder than, let's say, a farmer from today. And the reason for that is, let's say they had a family unit or a multi-family unit, is I think if everybody's doing a little bit, I don't think they'd be spending all day, unless, they're a few months away from a winter season and they're working a little bit harder to make reserves. But during that time, they might also be in an area where the cold at some parts in the past might not be that much, and they could still hunt for meat, and they will have stored some berries underground, or other types of protein. But even in those times, I would say they'd be maybe the term is nomads. The ones that are more still moving around, right? And then maybe at first, when these people were moving around, they'd be curious but cautious, and then they'd be learning new skills, maybe, and maybe that was kind of a part of collective learning by these traveling nomads that might stay or leave, and hopefully they'd have good intentions, and I would hope they would, especially if there's a big distance they travel between these villages. And I would think they'd want to trade things to be accepted, such as knowledge and skills, and stories, right? So in this collective learning, but maybe over time, without more competition or challenges or hardships, yes, I believe that they probably lost the ability to be more resilient or strive for excellence or strive for increased quality in how they lived and how they would be able to solve problems such as cold or a predator showing up, or and also started having sustainable practices in case there were herds moving in these areas, where they would be thinking long term to make sure that they would not disrupt these herds too much that they could depend on. So there must have been some thinking, and these nomads coming saying, no, some of us think the earth is round and not flat. Oh yeah, you're crazy, but thanks for your great stories. We'll see you again maybe next year if you do this sort of loop around a river or a coastline or something like that. Now that's that is some negative devolving of cultural patterns through agriculture or staying in one position. Do you believe there might be other patterns that were bad and that might have even gotten worse without us being aware of it, to the point that today, I think unconsciously, we don't even want to admit to it because we know that they've devolved so much, these things, that now we can't even fix them? Because you were mentioning, some negative aspects of staying in one place. And you mentioned maybe the body's not as strong and things like that, and being limited by a location instead of the adventurous knowledge seeking and strength building and skill building kind of practices of moving. Because right now, Irina, there are mass migrations happening because of climate change and civil unrest and war and pollution. And today, the tribes moving is very different than in those times. And what do you have to say about that?
Okay, I think there are two questions in that you're asking two questions. The first one is that I'll elaborate a little bit on that. Is that so? You mentioned quality, and that is exactly what I think Homo sapiens are not. They could define the quality of life as differently. So at the time of agricultural revolution, they thought that quality is having many kids and grow many things. That's the quality of life that they thought is better than to have nomadic lifestyle and go through their harsh winters, and many people die during those. So that's what they call quality, right? It's now, from our perspective, we could say, oh, what is quality? Is exploration and adventure. But for them, it was a static quality of life. So they could settle down, they could have a family, and that's where also family had started to strengthen. So I just want to elaborate a little bit. Wanted to elaborate a little bit on the different definitions of quality of life. So it's really different from what we call now quality of life right now. So
well, if they came from hardships of moving around and not being lucky or not making the right choices to find resources like food when they were moving, yes, if they found a place that was beside a river with land that was easy to grow, maybe fresh water coming from a mountain as well, and the climate maybe was affected by the river and water to be more temperate, yes, they would have said, wow, this is quality of life. And maybe that's one way. But if they lived closer to the equator, though, the winters would not have impacted them too much.
Yeah, I mean that like in those terms, the quality for them meant the quantity. So if you're a farmer, what is the quality for you? Is to get wealthy through planting things and having a rich harvest. That's the quality. This is through quantity. Yes. So the quality before was defined as, or those times was defined as quantity. So now we would say, oh, it's not quality, because we know if we grow things we exploit the soil, and we, step with the soil with lots of pesticide and all this stuff. So it's not quality, right? Quantity doesn't equal quality. So now we have different definitions of quality, perhaps different from those what the people, the Homo sapiens before had. So it's really kind of like time referenced, and it depends on the context, right? So, and for the second part, you mentioned about the migration. That migrations now are quite different from those that what Homo sapiens have experienced during their evolution times, different stages of it. So I would say they are the sources, the reasons why people migrate, right? They are basically the same. What, during their the what how people when the people had nomadic style of life, so they didn't have enough water, they couldn't grow stuff, so they migrated. But now the migrations are combined with the complexity of the system where we live, right? So you cannot easily migrate now to another country because you created artificial borders called nations, countries, and you created artificial tools to back up the system of artificial borders called passports and visas. So now the migrations are quite different in terms of the, mental comprehension.
Okay, well,
What is to be a refugee?
Well, that's my question to you then, to be specific, because I don't think it's the same what's happening today as back then. Because back then, let's say there was a group and a new group came, chances are that new group, especially if there's already structures and houses of about the same size, they'd try to take it over, and they'd be, it'd be survival, but it'd also be savagery a little bit, right? They wouldn't believe two can coexist when they're desperate from their travels and they see this. It'd be less likely to have. So that's kind of the past, but it might not have been the dominant experience in the past, though, because I think there was more solo travelers. But right now, I mean, we're looking at technology. We can move on boats and planes more easily. And yes, the imaginary borders and these magical passports, right, that we have to believe have some sort of value that is ridiculous. So right now, I mean, people aren't necessarily leaving a country because there was no rice there or water there, or I think it was more like a sense of security. And so if they arrive in a new place, they don't want to conquer it. I think they were just in danger. And of course, there are differences with, like, okay, a full tummy from a country where you had, two items put in your kid's tummy, rice and beans, and oh no, they never go hungry, but it doesn't help evolve the human brain. Then they get somewhere else, and then the United Nations keeps their bellies full, but it's not really what they need. They need, trauma treatment. They need a diversity of nutrition. So that would have been something that maybe was more likely to be there when there was less people on the planet, and they were able to find the more ideal locations to actually have a variety. Now, you mentioned quantity and quality, and you mentioned it with farming. So farming, for example, quantity, would it be enough food to fill everybody in that community and also to survive a winter? And then quality, when it comes to food, would it be a variety? And not just for the fun flavors, but also knowing that some serve as medicines, some provide physical benefits more than others, and maybe they would say, okay, the men are going to hunt, so we'll feed them more of these foods so they have the type of energy that will sustain them on their 3-day journey, while the women who are doing these other tasks, and again, I'm not being sexist here, but there were a lot of communities where this was the case, they would eat these kind of foods. And then when there's plenty harvest again, then everybody would benefit from the quality of the different types of nutrients from different food. But then there's also the time span, the lifespan of a person. Because at some points, maybe there'd be generations where, hey, all our kids are dying. So quality was actually the quantity of years that people survived, what they were aiming for. While nomads might have been traveling and seeing beautiful things and maybe sometimes missing their families, but they would say, I'm having a quality life because nobody in my family will ever see this mountain. And even if I freeze on it, I'll freeze with a smile on my face because that's quality for them. And they might die maybe at 28 or less, but they would have not known that maybe more years were possible or not. But that was a life of quality that they lived, while others would say, oh, so young, too bad he didn't. But more quality than somebody who lived 50, 60, 70 years. And right now, I think we're actually counting quality as how long we live, not the social interactions we're having when we're finishing our harvest and we're singing and dancing beside a fire and telling stories and having a good time. I think that's quality that we don't have that much anymore. And I think we're trying to get back to it during COVID times.
Okay, I think I just I'll correct a little bit the factual thing. I think there is a misunderstanding or something. So first of all, what I was trying to say back to the times of the agricultural revolution is that the definition of quality for a farmer might be different, is because he gets quality through quantity. So if he the evidence shows that there was not a variety of things. So they didn't have the quality, what we understand the quality in terms that how we understand the quality in modern times. They had a much poorer, as I mentioned earlier, they had a much poorer diet because they could only grow 2 or 3 types of food, which was really vastly different from the diet we hunters and gatherers had, because hunters and gatherers, they were relying on the wild to sustain their diet, to sustain themselves, whilst farmers and their families, they were relying on 2 types of crops and 2 types of foods. So that is why I mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, they were physically weaker. They had poor diet. Their kids, they even were. They had more distribution of diseases because they had livestock. They started to have livestock.
Maybe we should tell the audience what time frame you're talking about with
the agricultural revolution.
Yeah,
after
so
the beginning. Sorry, I don't remember the years. So it's 20.
No, not exactly. I think that would explain our conversation gap, because I was thinking more between 10 and 70,000 years ago was what I was more talking about. And you're talking about more, within the last 500 years probably, right?
No, I'm talking about the agricultural revolution time, right after the agricultural revolution time, and I'm talking about the lifestyle of hunter-gatherers. It's been very well documented and through archaeological findings, and the lifestyle of the person of a farmer after the agricultural revolution. So before they had the scientific revolution, so it's not the recent times. It's thousands and thousands of hundreds years ago. But anyway, I just wanted to say that the definition, how we define quality and quantity, might be really quite different, and also differ from hunter-gatherer, as you mentioned, the nomadic style of life. Maybe they didn't live a long life, they didn't have long lifespan, but they they had much more experienced life in terms of exploration, adventure, knowledge. They were much more knowledgeable, because you had to be a walking encyclopedia in order to be a hunter-gatherer, because you have to remember many things. There was not writing yet invented. It's also a fact, right? So for the farmers, They just needed to remember the seasonability of when and how to adjust to natural disasters. And there was a quite steady climate for a long time. So they actually, if they learned what kind of natural disaster and what season, that was pretty much enough. But they could spend more time with their families and build the family relationship and tribal relationship, right? Then they turned into tribes, and then so on, so on, so on. And then the villages turned to cities, right? They could grow. So for them, perhaps the growth and the quantity, which means quantity, equaled the quality of their life, right? Like from our maybe many people would prefer the quality of life of a hunter-gatherer. Can be short, but it was rich.
Okay, thank you, Irina. So thanks for clarifying the time period. I think yours was still closer to now than mine, but it's still, yours goes a fairly long time ago, like more than 2,000, maybe even more than 10,000 years ago is some of the stories you were telling of those ancestors. So we've gone through about 50 minutes. So I'm going to ask you how to get us back onto the topic of false hope in Earth-like planets, and how, you know, this all relates to the psychology of our tendencies. You know, Humanics is a little bit like patterns and tendencies of human thinking and human reactions to events, and forms of normalcy in what you can expect a person to behave like or act like. That's a little bit, it's not the exact definition I've written down, but it's kind of a little bit guide the Humanics aspect of what is causing us now, so many people, because I've never heard anybody say the scientific arguments for why it's crazy to believe this is coming anytime soon. So, you know, why are we not doing that? Is it based on we don't want to be admitting our denial that these Earth-like planets are so far beyond our reach? We need that kind of false hope right now. What do you think?
So the question is why we need false hope? Is that the question?
Why is that common? Because I'm not hearing conversations of people saying, "Hey, stop talking about Earth-like planets. It's you know, as likely as, you know, finding a 100% cure for cancer, which is not also as likely."
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's somehow rooted, and I'm trying also to think on that recently. I think it's somehow rooted in the, you know, believing that we are really the masters of the exploitation of the environment. And somehow maybe we don't want to believe that. We would say, oh no, like, you know, we care for the environment, yeah, we understand all of this, but, you know, deep inside that we conquered many species, and it, like, deep inside we're, you know, like, we somehow are driven by this kind of believing, like, oh, we are above all the species and we are the smartest. So these kind of beliefs, I think, they perpetuate this kind of thinking that you know, we can do it because we mastered you know, the environment. We exploit the environment to our benefits. We build technologies, we build cities, and we can go farther and farther. There is no end of what of boundaries or the intelligence of a human mind. So there is no limits for that,
But
no
don't you
boundaries.
find
So
that there's a lot of scientific illiteracy even among the experts who are excited talking about this? When you
oh,
look at
I
the
think it's not related really to the scientific literacy. I think it's related more to the evolutionary cognitive dissonance that our species
please give
has
your
been.
definition of cognitive dissonance.
Well, cognitive dissonance simply saying is that is a your when your belief contradicts with your actions. or your knowledge. So you know about something, but you do the thing that doesn't help, or you do the thing that is opposite of what you believe in, or you have contradictory beliefs in your mind. Is like, yes, I know that the population growth is a problem, but I still like to have kids, so I will have 2 or 3 kids, right? So, and then you hope that oh, you can educate them, so it will stop the population program. So something like, perhaps this will be an example of cognitive dissonance.
Well, that sounds like a mental illness because it sounds like a disconnection from reality and common sense when evidence is available.
Well, yeah, like we invent so many definitions and to defend also our culture and our mindset. So perhaps it's one of those cognitive dissonance, right?
Uh, I'm going to look it up too and see if we can come up with other examples. Cognitive dissonance. The state of having inconsistent thoughts, beliefs, or attitudes, especially as relating to behavioral decisions and attitude changes, or attitude change, which is slightly different than what I talk about, which is incongruence, which would be more like somebody saying something and their body language would be showing that they're being not genuine or sincere, but this is more within, deeper down, because it could be somebody having two worldviews or values or ethics that are in conflict. It's almost like saying Christian Science or economic life, and being able to form arguments for two sides at the same time and representing two sides at the same time. So it's a form of mental illness of cultures that are unable to help themselves anymore. And again, somebody might say, oh no, we need to have more kids because one will be born a genius and then he'll fix everything or she'll fix everything, which is, whoa, okay, that's a Messiah kind of complex, and it's pretty scary. Now, if there was a Jesus, and it's 2,000 years ago, maybe this Jesus was just like, hey, let's do things different. This is not going to turn out well. You can see you have, what the term would be cognitive dissonance. You're being incongruent. And he or she was ignored, and there was probably many people like this who were going against the norm, and evidence didn't make a difference with the norm. And I don't know, this Jesus story, whether he lived or not, it must have been through the telephone game, totally been misinterpreted. And I'm looking at Diane Fossey, one of the three great primatologist ladies. And in a short period of time, although she wrote about conservation, she said that she was not for people invading the habitats of gorillas, and yet in her name, organizations were formed. So again, if Jesus lived, why does everybody that follow his teachings act differently than what he's teaching? That's some serious mental illness, and I don't need to travel in any more countries to know this is the norm of 99.6% of people that claim to follow his teachings, and yet they're acting totally different. Now, this Diane Fossey lady, including the other primatologists who are alive today, are not discussing this. They're not pointing out this incongruence, this cognitive dissonance, because people are now going against what she said, using her name to raise money, and then again go into the habitats of gorillas and disturbing them. And these are one of the 4 great apes who are not really that different from us, and we're not any smarter than them. And so it's pretty sad that even in a short time, and Greta, the climate emergency activist, who is alive now and who's saying now, don't do this, don't say this in my name, and it's still happening now. So we can't even have heroes now that we actually define properly or follow properly. Where are our role models? We lost the ability to even have mentors or guides to even guide us. We're totally off path with this cognitive dissonance and this incongruence that hardly anybody will admit to or work on in their lives or talk about. So again, these are the psychological aspects that makes us not even have the conversations about there's people on a space station, and when they come back, we're noticing, oh my God, your body is really taking a hit from being without gravity. And yet we think that going that far away, if we understand how far it is based on the speed of light and the difference just between, the Earth and the Moon, is that somehow our bodies would even survive, and that there's science to actually make them survive. And then that we're getting there where, it'd be more like our grandkids that would be getting there. And if we don't have collective learning and we program software like we do now to teach stuff that actually keeps breaking down and is programmed by people that don't know much because they're pursuing just elitism in education, it's really in so many ways the physiology, the science of the distance of succeeding in creating a ship, in even knowing for sure that where they're going is actually going to be a place they're not going to say we screwed up. This is not even better than if we would just been on the moon. So nobody's talking about this, and if we did, I think it would be more people would actually start being eco activists or eco warriors, or start wanting to develop more scientific knowledge of these things.
Well, I don't think that nobody's talking about it, as for the ecocentristic, proposals and worldview. It was already around 50, 60 years ago. And I think I would mention the Venus Project and the founder, Jack Fresco, who advocated for many, now he's deceased, for many decades, this point of view. And I think scientists as Carl Sagan also did that with their, Cosmos series, the series of documentaries Cosmos, as far as I remember, was called.
I could explain that these people were ahead of their time in paradigms, and they even had followers, and yet their followers can't even keep up what they were doing, which is saying, even during the lifetime, not 2,000 years later, they can't even, because if you're that great and people follow you, and suddenly there's like 100 or 1,000 people like you, then the paradigms would change, but they're not changing. So what's happening to not change these paradigms?
Okay, so I'll try to finish my point, is that, and at the same time answering your question, having followers is not enough at all. You have to have their specific percentage of called the critical mass. The critical mass is, as to my knowledge, is 3% of the population. So having even 1,000 followers, it wouldn't be enough. So 3% of the population, you could count how much it is, right? So you could count it per country, or how you counted it by the division of administrative divisions. But still, you could have followers, but how much is the population, right? So it doesn't mean that followers of people who advocated this kind of worldview of Earthship, what was advocated by Buckminster Fuller, right? Buckminster Fuller. They didn't hit the critical mass. So, and even though you're alone or you're in a team, that's not enough to change their dominant worldview, a dominant value system of billions of people. We have billions of people. So, or millions of people, right? To say, if you can change the dominant worldview of the Western world, let's say, right? So the Western world could be the role modeling the further countries, but what now the Western world is doing is role modeling of uh, for high consumption, for example. And so poorer country or less developed countries, they want to be more developed countries as the Western world. And there is no fault in them because that's what the Western world is advocating, right? It's high consumption or high consumed level of light, right? A level of life, lifestyle of high consumption. So unless we hit the critical mass, and that's what, for example, the movement that I also a part of Extinction Rebellion is doing, they're trying to reach the critical mass, to spread the awareness, and not only the awareness, because we can talk about this stuff, and there are people talking about this stuff, though their talk is quite weak because they still think that the politics will solve the problems, all the problems of politicians, or we can have we can have that we need to have politics to change the things. But the talk is not enough. So I'll finish here by the conclusion is that you have to do an action. And the critical mass, the 3%, is the people who are doing the action, not just talking. We can talk all 90%, but
Give me
talk is not an
examples of
action.
action.
The examples of action is being a part of a movement, is educating, is doing the educational part, is doing the awareness, spreading the awareness,
Yeah, but
going
support.
going out to the street, joining an organization. This is an action. This is a part of an action. Teaming up with people, working collaboratively. The other thing that I'm not going to talk about that, but I've been through the experience of joining many movements, and I know that even those movements towards the worldview of our ecocentrism, the possible ecocentrism, they cannot work with each other. So there is another challenge at another level. It's not only the educational challenge of spreading the awareness and hitting the critical mass, and also getting the critical mass to join the action, but between those movements, there is no collaborative platform that they can come together and say, look, even though our methods differs, but our goal is the same. Let's work together. Every organization, every movement, let's put our resources in that. I'm not saying, oh, we actually different from you. So instead of focusing on differences, we need to focus on commonality and the common goal. And this is another challenge at another level.
I don't know as much as you do about the Extinction Rebellion, but one thing that I did write one time that seemed like an objective kind of write-up was very positive. Again, people have to be careful when they choose the term of something without defining it. I mean, people that join it, they probably understand why it's called the Extinction Rebellion, but again, they don't seem to realize the ignorance of the masses. So that's why they might never reach their 3%. And I think that Jacques Fresco had a lot of positive things, but again, I think he was also an example of someone that didn't have a good balance of different types of intelligence to possibly be a leader and grow this movement, because just having the right solutions has happened many times in history, but why it's not being implemented, it has to go through stages of understanding why it's important and a benefit to all, and also how to implement it, and also what the next stages are after that first implementation of certain things are, because it's an ongoing thing. There's no final goal, and people have to accept that. So here's a spectrum. Let's say that this would be like an ecocentric humanist worldview. And that would mean that we put, our biosphere first before us. But humanism also talks about it's our responsibility to solve our own problems that we created, not wait for miracles or just try to invent technology that, again, will be programmed by people with the wrong worldviews or understanding of things to not even work. We have to understand there's no saviors coming. There's no Earth-like planet this close to us. So So this would be one extreme of a worldview that would be successful in all sorts of ways. Now here we might have, let's call it anthropocentric, okay, which in some ways is the opposite of this, but it's still on the spectrum because we also have people who are even lower. They're ethnocentric. That means they don't even believe that their species is similar. They believe their culture is better than all cultures, and that is so common. And then you're talking about ego, which is just that one single person. And over years and years of observations, the doctor of Humanics here is noticing that we've never been close to this. We gravitate around this and are very proud, although there's a lot of evidence that says this leads to our evolutionary end. But I'm seeing things get worse towards ethnocentrism, which means cultural ideologies. Ours is better than yours, when none are actually good. You know, make America great again. Well, what history book are you looking at that it was great? And how do you define great? You want to use the English word great? And then there's ego. And I really believe that we're between these last two and going that way. So for me, if there's any group, whether it's Extinction Rebellion or any others, that are trying to move the 3%, and by the way, I believe it's 66% for a paradigm shift, not 3, unless 3 are going to be some sort of, they'll have particular powers and they'll be able to work on like a 500-year plan or something. And then I think whatever group working on 3% should actually be talking about this actual spectrum. And everything else will fix itself, because again, they're working on 3% of psychology, but we're not admitting that we're all really on this spectrum, and it's worse than before, and it's getting worse. I'm noticing it in everybody, and it's really, when you explain it to them, and they kind of gave you enough attention to understand it, I can still see that there was no schema, so it bounced off, or one ear out the other. And then they don't know how to put it together. So that should be part of this 3%. It should be forming people to actually be able to have functioning brains again. Because as much as you do the perfect TED Talk, it's perfectly done, there isn't even really 100,000 people on Earth that will actually be able to manifest this solution in this TED Talk. So that's the spectrum we need to be working on.
Yeah, just I'll just like say a word about an interesting thing that Extinction Rebellion is basically doing a good job in terms of commonality, uniting different organizations. They are working with different organizations, also because they do not have an agenda. So the time when you start having an agenda and you try to collaborate, and if you find movements or organizations that do not agree with your agenda, that's where your collaboration stops. It never begins.
Well, what would the Extinction Rebellion do? Let's say some of their...
That's the point. They grow fast, and that's what I also joined. That's why I also joined, in order to learn and in order to understand the social movements in general. And of course, the first priority is because I care and I can contribute somehow my skills, perhaps. So they do things without the agenda, right? So they do not say, like, what would polarize people? What would polarize people is the extraction of fossil fuels versus the extraction of renewables. Because the renewable energy is also a form of extraction, of the natural extraction, of going and exploiting the seabed, destroying for the minerals and metals that we need for renewables in order to satisfy our energy needs, which is completely, detrimental to the environment, destructive. So there is no polarization in that space. We just say that we are in the climate emergency and extinction crisis. And the crisis that also, by the way, not so many environmentalists really, if you talk about the depletion of our nitrogen. So the loss of nitrogen. It's a really huge problem that really few activists talk about.
One
But
I
anyway,
asked you, Irina, if you knew of any studies, and I think you might have sent me links and I didn't look at them, that said that we're actually creating an imbalance in the gases in the atmosphere that Gaia theory can explain has been stable for a long time, and which would include what is important to us, such as oxygen, not just, you know, the greenhouse gases or nitrogen or other things. So that's something that we should be hearing in the news, imbalances, you know, and also other things that are creating respiratory diseases, which is not related to viruses, which is related to the toxins of our consumption and lifestyle kind of cultures. So yeah, I'm worried. Now, you were talking about Extinction Rebellion, also almost trying to say that you see them start up stuff and then do they move on, or it fails and then they go try collaborating somewhere else, and sometimes that succeeds there.
so what I was trying to say is that they don't have an agenda such as like, okay, let's turn to the renewables because it's an agenda. It goes politically. So it's, let's say we have two parties. One party is pro fossil fuels, like in the United States, and the other one is against this. So they pro renewables, right? But none of these parties, of course, talk about the most important thing that we need to do is to cut off critically, at critical rate, our consumption. Nobody talks about it because renewables imply that you will still have economic growth. Fossil fuels imply you will still economic growth, but you have to go degrowth because there is plenty of scientific evidence that we have to go degrowth very, very fast, like this. So, you
Okay,
know, that's why they're
I
talking
just,
about the, let
I'm
me
sorry,
finish.
I'm interrupting you because I need to be sure I understand what you're saying. Did you say growth? The word growth? We need to go to growth?
Degrowth.
Huh?
Degrowth.
Okay, so do the opposite of
Yes,
uh,
yes, degrowth.
economic progress,
Degrowth.
growth in
It's called
consuming
economic. It's called
resources.
economic degrowth.
Okay,
It's
so
called economic degrowth.
okay.
Yes, yes, yeah. This is a terminology. Okay, so and that is why like they just say that we need to go degrowth because of their evidence that we are in an extinction crisis, we in the climate emergency, and there is a scientific evidence of that. That's it. They don't tell you what to do. And that's
Uh,
where the space for, you know, people to come in and say, so they don't provide the solutions. So on the other side, they have, that is why they have a very, very open door for many organizations or many movements to
uh,
come in because they don't have a fixed agenda. What is the agenda? I tell you what to do, right? What the solutions are, right? So on the other side is the Venus Project that have the solutions, but they don't grow their movements because they say, if you don't agree with our solutions and agenda, sorry, we cannot collaborate with you, right? And this is the interesting thing that I've been taking part in as a volunteer on the both side, right? And what I was just thinking, what if, how can we get, you know, this together combined, right? So we have the extinction, which is really Extinction Rebellion, which is huge, and I think it will always grow. There is a trend for it, open door. And how would, if we just hit the critical mass with the Extinction Rebellion and then apply the solutions what the Venus Project proposes, right? That would be a very good opportunity to see something changing. But so the problem is that now it's like, you know, there is no basis for collaboration of not only the Venus Project, but many projects that proposing. But the Venus Project, I would say, is what is a more kind of comprehensible, more complete, specific proposals that what needs to be done, and therefore as well, of course, the cutting of the high consumption and all this garbage that we don't need like completely changing the system, right? The system change. So if they're all organizations for the systems change, not politically aligned with any parties, not agenda alive, right? Or monetary aligned, like we're aligned with money, or money kind of like their goal is to make money. If all these movements would come together, that will be, I think that will be some hope here.
Thank you. I'll try to, because we're getting close to our goal of finishing up, and you'll get a chance to maybe give your conclusion, because maybe we'll try to finish in about 10 minutes. I'll try to see what I can understand about this. From what you said, Extinction Rebellion, if it has no goal or motivation, or I can't remember the exact word you use, expectation or purpose.
Agenda.
Agenda, yeah, that's the better word, and that's the one I was looking for. So if they have none, well, it's hard to believe they have none, but maybe they're not pushing one. Maybe what they're doing is they're just trying to create collaborations between specialists, whether these specialists are just in the research development stage and would even have the different types of collaborative intelligence, as social creatures to actually get into the, applying the solutions. So they're just creating maybe activists, which is very important. But I'm not sure if you find it entirely more positive or negative, and you don't have to answer that, what the Extinction Rebellion is doing. And then I know that you've been involved with the Venus Project a long time, and a little bit of research that I did into that, and I was going to go volunteer there in Venus, Florida, and I was stopped at the border by a pretty arrogant, cocky, and redneck type of customs agents who were very proud of the new president picture on their wall, and who probably, most of them now, might not even want to vote for him anymore. But when I contacted the Venus Project, I didn't get the sense that they wanted money from me, but I also didn't get the sense that they cared at all in any way to have me come down there and volunteer in a hands-on way. And this is way pre-COVID, where the fears of in-person interactions wasn't there. So I'm not sure. I didn't get the sense that there was an ability for them to work in a group and grow, because maybe the plans are, as modernity is speeding up, are a little bit outdated, and they're a little bit also limited as a way to solve the entire system. And I don't want to use a system like you. I think the only way I want to use system in these types of conversations is here. We can say this system of, various types of ways to interpret reality that now are so insane that we don't even realize that we are all almost our own worst enemies, in the sense that we don't realize that we're working in different ways. And then, of course, we have to keep talking about egocentrism. Egocentrism. For example, when you've been with Extinction Rebellion a shorter time, but longer with Venus Project. Now, of course, you would say it's great if these two could come together because they'd complement each other, but that would also have the element of finalizing your life, or to complement your life choices in the last few years on what you focused on. But I have to agree with you that there's a serious lack of collaboration. And I think what we should be working on as we work on this mental issue spectrum is we have to work on why is there so many smart people have great ideas for solutions, and we've never implemented them, and it always gets blocked at collaboration before. So my experience is in the north of Vancouver Island. I go to this retreat. I paid a lot of money for it, and I wanted to believe that these would be mentors and role models. And there was an exercise that was very important to me, because we had to play the roles of representing different species, and I was, I think, an oak tree, and we were discussing, what about these people-primates there? Why are they acting like this? And it's bad for all of us. And I was mad, and I was the only one in the tree as being mad. And I thought it was weird that the other people were not. That's not what that bird would be saying, or that's not what that insect would be saying. And sure enough, during that weekend retreat that I paid a lot of money for, the neighbor of this person decided to make some money by getting a lumber company chopped down. So we're hearing these chainsaws. This is very ironic. We're hearing chainsaws. And the neighbor is saying, oh, you know, the lady who actually was the facilitator, main facilitator. This was right beside this beautiful property that we walked in and did exercises, and we're hearing this chainsaw. The trees are coming down right beside her property, and she doesn't realize that, you know, she thinks the neighbor owns land as if that's not a mental illness and that it's normal, it's his choice, and she wouldn't get mad. And this is all during this exercise, and I'm this oak tree. It's like, the fuck? People can't even get into the right worldview. And again, if I talk about this, oh yeah, yeah, and I, and it was sad. And I also went to an eco village where we actually kind of were given on a Buddhist temple kind of mountaintop on Salt Spring Island some weekend time and a week time to prepare these workshops. And again, I'm seeing how it's great. Yeah, we're working together with these little life skills combined with living skills workshops where you know, one of us is blind, the other is can't speak, the other one has one arm, and we're trying to work as a team to start a fire. And I think it was more because of me we succeeded. We actually burned a little bit of the facilitator's jacket. I didn't think we'd get it that well. And so, but I see this, I see another workshop for building a bow and arrow, but I'm also noticing none of them have life skills that they would actually be able to, if there was an earthquake and Vancouver Island would be cut off from most of its resources that now comes from the mainland instead of growing its own food, is that now, okay, sure, if this happened when they're on there, oh my God, during this weekend, we can't go back, there's been this big earthquake, is they would survive a little bit longer in the woods, but they would still be turning against themselves without these human thinking tools that social creatures should have mastered. So again, I'm getting back to there's something wrong up here, and you're noticing it too. And I think the only system word we should be talking about is this, because the rest of the system is fine without us. And the only way the system is going bad is because of us and up here. And again, we're not even talking about overpopulation. Is Extinction Rebellion talking about this? If they want to degrowth, are they talking about, you know, a population, a birth control, things like this? That's my conclusion. What's yours? And then I'll close it off.
Yeah, that's my conclusion. I would just share a little bit that my reflection, because my a little bit from my personal reflection and based on my personal experience, being as an activist or volunteer or educator, like, you know, myself also I'm a teacher. And so as I also my yeah and a dance teacher now, so I'm trying. But anyway, it's the personal growth in the field of a personal growth. I'm trying to, since already for a few years, I'm trying to build my own, you know, teaching material to go with my teaching material to kids. And there are really few schools who are interested, because, you know, and the kind of like when you teach critical thinking or scientific literacy, not so many schools would be interested, but there are some.
Okay. Irina, there's a difference between the schools and the children, because chances are, if you were given a chance to talk to the children and demonstrate, most of the children would be very interested.
It's true. It's true.
So that's
yeah,
a flaw.
it's true.
That's a flaw here, that the adults or management teams or schools or school boards are preventing this progress, right?
Yes, it's true. It's true. Yeah, but you know, like I'm trying my best to go through different sources and to find those kind of schools who are open to that, because parents open. You know, it's not like the schools thing. It's also the parents thing. You know, mostly it's parents things, because parents pay money. And if parents pay money for something they're not interested in, they're not going to pay money, right? So in order to survive in this system, you have to teach for money, or at least a little bit. And on my, I would say, the personal growth as well, but not related to my career. I also trying to do something myself, because I found out this is the thing, that if I at least I write and I write articles, and if they're helpful somehow for pointing out the flaws in our system, then I maybe would be more efficient, rather than, just only contributing to the project and knowing that that's actually is not really scientifically backed up, or perhaps because there is like some lack of information. And so all of this reflection is kind of going more to the individual level of work, that I'm now contributing more to individual level of work rather than, teaming up. But I would say teaming up and collaborating with people is really critical and crucial for what you're saying is a shifting the paradigm of the system. And I'm very, very interested in collaborating with others. It's just not so many people, or maybe I don't myself put enough effort into collaboration. But if somebody watches our talk and want to join in or contact us and say, hey, like let's do something together, like I would be really, really, like it will be really, really welcome from my side. So that's how I wanted to, personally, to make a conclusion for this talk.
Okay, and if you can maybe send me, because I'm just going to load this video right away because it's late. If you can send me the contact information for you want me to put with this video, I'll add it maybe tomorrow. I'll just load the video now. And also, when you write about systems yourself, maybe just give me a couple of lines on what you mean by that, just to clarify what you were saying at the end. For example, do you mean the education system, for example, or something like that? So define what you mean that you're working on as system. Now, the last question for you that should be a very short answer that you can decide with me is, aside from naming this video post, the next one in my series, I think it'll be 670 for the Master of Science Ecocentric Humanism, is what do you think should be the second part of this title? And at first I was going to say something about false hope in Earth-like planets, but I think we deviated a lot, but I think in a positive way, because we're really going back to the mind game. So what do you think? I'm thinking maybe why are we moving away from systems thinking, maybe, or like what would be a good title with my course title for our subject of conversation today?
Well, if you want to touch upon the system thinking, yeah, I think it's quite a good idea to
No,
to
but
have
for
a
today's
conversation.
conversation, what is a good title?
Sorry, yeah, for today's, you mean the title for today's conversation? Is that
Yeah,
what
I don't
you?
think I'm going to call it Earth-type planet because we didn't talk mostly about that. What do you think we should call it?
Oh, okay. We talked a lot, I think, a lot about your questions, what your questions are, right? What prevents us to develop a more ecocentric mindset, right? I think we talked about those factors a lot, but something related to the human mind or our states of mind right now, and factors that preventing us to develop a more ecocentric mentality, I would say.
Okay, so I've got a couple of things, but they look a little bit too long. So give me something short, really short. What do you think?
Okay, yeah, I have a problem with short things. That's why my articles titles are all long. Okay, um,
I would say maximum 6 words.
uh, fact.
So far, what I've got
I
is
want to say just moving, well, general conversation of moving from ecocentrism to ecocentrism. I don't know. It's just general title.
okay. I was thinking of something at the same time you said that, and I lost it. I was thinking maybe moving towards an awareness of systems type thinking, maybe.
Yeah, if there are 6 words as you want, yeah, of course.
Because we're not going to succeed. We have to just move towards the idea that there's different levels of it and different, intensities of being successful at it. And we talked a little bit about the spectrum. Like one, anthropocentrism is nice in a way if you're on an island where most of what's going wrong is people arguing among themselves, then an anthropocentric worldview where people unite, we're all the same, would be good. But that's really outdated with what's happening on the planet now. And of course, if we could have jumped towards ecocentrism at the beginning, then we wouldn't have had that much if we're all one global life form. So how about moving towards an awareness of systems thinking? No, I don't want to say
sure.
I don't want to say
like
systems thinking. I want to say systems types of thinking. I think for most of the general viewer would be better, because systems thinking, again, and I tested this with the Ecology of Systems Thinking Facebook group, and nobody defines it the same way. So it's kind of, we have to say systems types of thinking, and I think we gave some explanations or ideas. Okay, so I'm going to do that one instead of the ones I had before. For example, Martin and Irina not fighting for about an hour and a half. Title. or causes of dysfunctional worldviews, but it kind of goes a little bit in there.
Yeah, so, it goes, yeah.
After 4 years, Martin and Irina somewhat starting to collaborate could be the title.
No, but number 2 is still good. Causes of dysfunctional, what's that? Of dysfunctional
causes of ongoing, maybe dysfunctional worldviews.
Because we talk about causes.
I know we talked a little bit about what led to them, like agriculture and things like that. Yeah. Okay, we're going to go with number 2, and maybe I'll finish with no blood being spilled. Okay, so thank you very much. It's amazing how in space all you need is one sweater to stay warm. You are a very warm lady. So thank you for participating again in a short time with me, because I wish we would work on more things. And maybe the thing that we could work on next time is a little bit about what we've noticed as a common issue is maybe suggesting solutions for collaborations not ending so easily, right? Which would be good for us, but also with the groups. And I've kind of stopped years ago wanting to be an activist, because again, I've noticed this. But again, when I stop being like that, guess what? I'm losing my collaborative skills.
Yeah.
So that means if I find people,
that's what I say.
Inviting you, we're so excited about your program. I'm like super rusty to interact with people now. So that means that, this is serious, even with us, not with just groups. So thank you.
Okay,
and
see you.
I'm going to stop the recording, and if something goes wrong, I'll let you know. Okay, and then we'll use yours. Thank you, Irina. Have a good day, and have a good night for me. Bye-bye.
Bye.